we've both covered high school football for a long time, since before 4 teams made the playoffs. I remember I was maybe might have been a sophomore or junior in college when they went from 2 to 3 teams. You might have been early on at the Trib or at the Brenham newspaper.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly when that was, but that sounds about right. That maybe late 90s.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I started at the Trib in 98, so is somewhere in that vicinity.
I just remember thinking a few years after I graduated that, man, well, that's just a, hand out playoff trips if you're going to let 3 teams go. But do you think, do you feel how it's changed it's obviously changed the landscape. There's no question about that. But do you sense ways in which it's changed the landscape when we get to, week 10 out of 11-week regular season like we are right now?
Yeah, I do think it has sucked a little of the drama out of the end of the regular season, which is unfortunate because I appreciate essentially that early start to the playoffs, which is basically play-in games for the playoffs. Basically you got 2 teams coming down to the wire, and the winner makes the playoffs, the loser goes home. We still have those games, but is it as dramatic when it's for 4th place? I don't think so. I agree with you. I remember when we went from 2 to 3. It was around that time that we talked about, and I remember our good friend David G. Campbell, who used to work at the Trib and in College Station for a long time. He was one of those sort of old school guys that was like, oh my gosh, 3 teams? Are you kidding? Really railing against it a little bit. And in hindsight, now I feel like 3 is sort of a good compromise. Let's go back to 3, because 4 really does feel like too many in a lot of cases, because especially when you have 5 and 16 districts where 4 teams make the playoffs. It's just like, well, you're basically letting everybody in. You get a lot of 3 and 7 playoff teams, and is that good for anyone? And when they opened it up really to 2A and up, all have 4 teams making the playoffs. It was like, yikes, because some of those lower levels, if you're a 4th place 2A team, you can have some pretty bad teams making the playoffs. And it doesn't really matter what level it is. A lot of times those 4th place teams aren't very good. Now, there are districts where that is the exception. And you have stacked districts. That's always going to happen. But I think more often than not, you get a lot of really lopsided 1 versus 4 matchups in the bi-district round.
Yeah, I think potentially our best 4th place playoff team this year might be like the Hamilton Bulldogs or somebody like that. You mentioned on Friday, one of the things I found last night is that Mejia won 1 game, is playing Bullard, who has won 0 games. And the winner of that game in that 5-team district is going to the playoffs, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and I believe there was a district in Houston a year or 2 ago where an 0-10 team got into the playoffs, and that's the most baffling thing ever. But it was a case of, I think one of the other teams in the district had to call it season for some reason or whatever. But
right.
But yeah, it was a big story because it was like, oh, they were the shining example of what's wrong with high school football, and obviously I think they were sheepish and sort of embarrassed about the whole thing too. It was like, look, we realize we're not very good, but what are we supposed to do?
Like, yeah, you're out the door on the way to basketball practice, and they say, hold on, come back. Well, in my column that I write for Friday, and I started to work out some of the things, and I've decided some of these games, instead of calling them, for a playoff berth, I'm gonna kind of put a little bit of a negative spin on it and say they're elimination games.
That's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, you can call them play-in games, you can call them elimination games, pre-playoff games. Anytime essentially you're playing for a spot. I mean, one team's going home, one team's moving on, and so elimination game is totally fair. That's all a playoff game really is
That's true.
one elimination game after another.
Well, and that brings us back to a point that I always make when people talk about 4 teams in the playoffs, and they try to talk about that it's ruined high school football, and I don't think it has. But here's the thing: that second week of the playoffs is as if only 2 teams made the playoffs.
Correct. And when you get into the second week and beyond, you do not have to look far for great matchups. And you and I have said it for years. Once you get to Thanksgiving week, I don't care what level you're on, 1A through 6A. If you've gotten to Thanksgiving week, you have done something. You've had a good season.